Welcome. Good afternoon. I am Brian Kaszuba, the Associate Director for the Center for New York City Law at New York Law School and an adjunct professor at the school. I'm very excited to welcome you all to our first Law and Leadership Forum with two exceptional candidates for the next mayor of the city of New York. Dean Anthony Crowell had very much hoped to be here today, but unfortunately he's dealing with a sudden and unexpected family issue that came up. So I'm helping in his place. The perils of live programming. But really, this event is all about our students. It's about the questions that are on their minds. As the next generation of leaders, they are eager to learn more about the candidates' ideas, leadership philosophy, and strategies, and most importantly, who holds the most promise for their future. We thank the audience for watching this dialogue today between our students and the candidates, and we hope that it is informative to your decision-making process. Today, we have 5 members of the Dean's Leadership Council, the DLC, as we like to call it. It's a special group of students who are interested in government, policy, and leadership. Today's students are all first-year law students with close ties to New York City. Several of them, like many others in our student body, work in public service and attend New York Law School in the evening. That makes them well suited for today's candidates, who are both long-time and high-profile public servants. This program is part of New York Law School's new Law and Leadership Institute. And that's why today's focus is leadership, which will determine how our city recovers and as city government undergoes a newly wholesale transition. Finally, one quick programming announcement. Today's session will end shortly after 1 o'clock. And on April 28th, that session will likely start about 1 o'clock, and we will share updates closer to that date for those who have RSVP'd. So with that, I want to welcome Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. Borough President Adams was born in Brooklyn, grew up in Queens, and he worked his way through school and joined the NYPD, where he rose to the rank of captain, while also pushing for major reforms within the department. He then represented Brooklyn residents in the New York State Senate, and in 2013, he was elected Brooklyn Borough President. He is the borough's first Black leader. He has promoted economic growth, public safety, public health, and nutrition, and better government through transparency and technology. We are privileged to have him join us today. Welcome, Borough President Adams.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Great. Given the time limits, let's go directly to our students so they all have the opportunity to ask their questions. We've allotted about 5 minutes for each student to do their question and for you to give your answer. So with that, we'll start with our first student, Kathryn. Kathryn?
Good afternoon, Borough President Adams. My name is Kathryn, and I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I am a 1L pursuing public interest law. Last year, during an interview with podcast host Elizabeth Alfano, you said there is a different requirement for a leader in uncertain times. How do you plan, if at all, to adjust your leadership style as mayor to meet the demands of New Yorkers amid the COVID-19 pandemic and our recovery from it?
Well, there's several things. Number one, this is an amazing city where any given day you could have a plane that will land or crash on the Hudson River, or you can have a plane fly into the building. The uncertainty of this city, it calls for a leader to be able to adjust, not to instill panic in New Yorkers or into the responding men and women who are dealing with the emergencies or everyday life in this city. I'm the only person that's running for mayor who I have done this for over 22 years. The uncertainty of being a ranking member and a supervisor in the police department really prepared me for the type of leadership that's needed to deal with the uncertainties of the.
It's like we're experiencing a little
today's and tomorrow. COVID took us off on live. I'm sorry, I'm in my vehicle because I'm going to another emergency. I hope I came through. we could have saved more lives and we could have done a better job in giving out the vaccinations. So it's about instilling the right leadership or showing everyday responders that you're going to give them the tools they need to do their job effectively in the city.
Great. Thank you, Borough President, for that answer. So now we're going to move on to Konstantine to ask your question.
Hi, Borough President. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. My name is Konstantine, and I'm a 1L evening student, and I'm interested in real estate law. I'm from Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and I have a passion for New York City politics and policy. And that passion really grew while I was a New York City Urban Fellow working in city government. So with that little bit of background about me, my question to you is this. So this election cycle, the city council will experience extraordinary turnover. You have 35 out of 51 council members, the majority with whom you will have no prior relationship will be newly elected. And there'll also be a new city council speaker. So there's some obvious and inherent challenges with this. And I'm curious, how will you address them?
Well, we heard this before 2 sessions ago, or I should say 2 cycles ago, when Mayor de Blasio came into office. He too had a substantial number of new councilmen and women who were elected for the first time. And I believe it's about developing relationships and being a deep listener and understanding the diversity of this city. We have new council people, but we don't have new communities. These are the same communities that have been in place and have worked hard to really fortify a qualitative form of living in their areas. And I know these communities so well. Just looking at Brooklyn, where 47% of Brooklynites speak a language other than English at home. The comfortability I have in going to all of our different neighborhoods, not only as a police officer that policed throughout this city, but also as a state senator. I have continually visited the various communities in this city. Understanding the needs of communities will help me understand the needs of those council people who are elected, and creating a partnership where we could see that this is one New York and we're all in this together as we cycle out of COVID-19. And that's the partnership I want to develop with our new council persons.
Thank you. Our next question is coming from Rana.
Brooklyn Borough President Adams, hello, and thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you.
I'm Rana. My name is Rana. I'm a Manhattan resident. I'm also an immigrant and a tech entrepreneur. Currently a 1L day student, and my goal is to work on regulations of emerging technologies as it applies to the business and financial sectors. My question to you is, we are currently living in an era of deep misinformation that has unfortunately led to undermining the trust in our government and our democracy. As a leader, how will you drive greater transparency and confidence across city agencies?
Your question is so important. When I came into the police department, I was a computer programmer. I had the skills of programming mainframes using Fortran, Assembly, and COBOL. They're all considered hieroglyphics now. No one is using them. But for the most part, I was part of the small team that started the first of its kind using real-time technology to take law enforcement from being reactive to becoming proactive and eventually predictive. What I realized during that time, our police department was dysfunctional, like many of our agencies are. Our city is a dysfunctional place, like the big cities across America. And I believe we need to look at all of our agencies and, number one, become a mission-driven city, that all of our agencies are aligned together, but we have to use technology like Boston is using now with CityScore. This allows the transparency that's needed, and it allows us to properly gauge our successes. How well are we doing in a real-time fashion so we can take corrective actions when it's needed? If we don't stop allowing our city to operate in silos. Cities are made up of agencies. If we don't allow those agencies to de-silo, we're never going to effectively deal with the needs of everyday New Yorkers. Our inefficiencies are creating the inequities and in some cases the injustices, and we're going to change that around under my leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that moves on to our next question coming from Kayla.
Hi, Borough President Adams. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
My name is Kayla, and I work for the City of New York during the day, and I'm a 1L Evening Division student looking to pursue criminal law. So my question to you is, how will your wide range of experiences in the NYPD allow you to be a leader who adequately faces the challenges of engaging in police reform while simultaneously combating violent crimes such as the rise in gun violence and recent hate crimes?
I have not been on one forum in the last 2.5 years that this question was not presented. Public safety is the prerequisite to prosperity. We must be safe. And I policed in the city during the mid 80s and early 90s when we were experiencing 2,000 homicides a year, 98,000 robberies, and an equivalent amount of felony assaults. And it devastated our city. Tourism was low. No one wanted to do business here in New York City. Homeowners were afraid to leave their homes. Our children were really imprisoned in their own communities. But at the same time, we had an over-aggressive police force where 1 million Black and brown children were stopped and frisked. We saw marijuana arrests went through the roof, particularly in economically challenging communities. We can't go back to the days of crime, and we can't go back to the days of heavy-handed policing. There's several things we can do. Number one, we must become more proactive in changing the ecosystem of public safety to really build a symbiotic relationship with police and communities. I'm going to rebuild that trust in a real way. We're not going to allow officers who are abusive to stay in the department for a long period of time, like in the case with Pandaleo. It took us 4 years to cycle him out of the department. We will have a fair trial, but it will be done in an expeditious fashion to ensure that we have the finest men and women part of our law enforcement community. Number two, we're going to better use our taxpayers' dollars in the police department. We spend about $400 million a year on overtime. We don't have to have officers on overtime waiting to testify in court when we can use technology like Zoom and WebEx, where they can testify and get off overtime. And we can civilianize our department. Too many officers are carrying out civilian duties, which is more expensive than allowing civilians to do. The money we save, we can do proactive things to prevent crime, like dyslexia screening, believe it or not. 30% of the inmates at Rikers Island are dyslexic. If we do dyslexia screening, we can prevent people from feeling as though they can't learn and end up on Rikers Island. If you don't educate, you will incarcerate and you will create crimes. So we're going to take a more proactive approach to public safety and not just a reactive approach that we're witnessing now, and build a better relationship between communities and policing.
Thank you, Borough President. Now we're going to move on to our next question from Justine.
Good afternoon, Borough President Adams.
Afternoon.
Yeah, thank you for being here. My name is Justine. I currently live in Manhattan and I work full-time as a New York City public servant. I'm a first-year student in the Evening Division program, and I'm interested in pursuing a career in criminal justice. My question to you is this. You're a proponent of using technology to address the issues that the city faces, and I've suggested ideas like using one digital platform to access all city services that I believe you mentioned earlier. How do you plan to operationalize this technology and the data collected to shape and drive policies, as opposed to using it as a tool for transparency?
And that is so important. When you think about it, we waste money in our city because we cannot properly gauge how we are distributing the resources and the tax dollars. Remember, taxpayers are paying taxes, so they receive the services through their agencies. And right now, our agencies, as I indicated, are siloed. By creating a system similar to what they're doing in Boston, the City Score, I'm going to do a City Score 2.0. We're going to take the data from the 311 system. We're going to take the open source data. We're going to partner with our corporations here in the city and our schools of higher learning to create a one system platform in the city, similar to what we did when we wrote the first programs of OLTPS that later became ComStat. Right now, we are not using the data of this city to become more predictive in the behaviors that we are attempting to correct. We have what I call a downstream mindset in this city and not an upstream mindset on how to prevent the crises in our city. So the goal is to really build out one platform using and protecting the data of New Yorkers, such as if a mother is capable of receiving WIC or SNAP because they're food insecure. Why are we asking that mother to go from agency to agency to sign up for the information? And if English is a second language for you, it's even more challenging. When we have that mother and that family's data, we should be signing them up automatically and giving them the resources they need. We send back over $25 billion to the federal government each year because we're not using some of the resources we have here because it is just extremely difficult to receive the accessibility in our agencies, and we're going to turn that around. We have to move this city to a smarter city, using the right algorithms to run the city and using the right access to the data to give New Yorkers what they need.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to second round of questions. And this round, we're going to start off with Kathryn.
Thank you. As an aspiring public interest attorney, I, along with so many others, appreciate the need for affordable housing. As borough president, you have effectively overseen the fourth largest city in the United States. Tell us about your values and approach to leadership that will guide your land use and land development for affordable housing as mayor.
Well, one thing that I believe makes me uniquely qualified to be the mayor is not only competency, but character. My life journey, knowing what it was or what it is to be on the verge of homelessness. You know, for all of you on this call, they used to call my family the glad bag children. We used to carry a glad bag full of clothing to school every day because we thought we were going to be thrown out due to mom inability to pay the mortgage. And so I know what it is to not have housing, and we have failed a countless number of New Yorkers. But we also have our zoning policies wrong. We upzone in poorer communities. Affluent New Yorkers move in and displace longtime tenants. I believe one solution should solve a multitude of problems. We should be upzoning in affluent communities, places like 42nd Street down to 14th Street, from 9th Avenue over to Park Avenue. And we should have poorer New Yorkers moving those areas in affordable units. Why is this solving a multitude of problems? Because it's also going to compel us to segregate our school system, integrate our school system. We have one of the most segregated school systems in the nation. It's going to allow people to have access to healthy food. It's going to allow people to be in transit-rich areas. And so we need to look at a change in how we are zoning in this city to state that the affordability problem is something for all New Yorkers to address. And no more sacred cows. There's no reason Soho, you only have to be an artist to live in Soho. This is unacceptable. And these zoning rules have been used traditionally to lock out diversity. And we need to change and move in another direction.
Great. Our next question is coming from Kayla.
My next question is, how will you translate your roles as a state legislator and borough advocate to that of mayor, the city's chief executive officer, with broad operational and fiscal responsibilities?
Well, it's a combination. And I believe if we are isolated just in my role as a state senator, the first Black to chair Homeland Security, the first Black to chair Race and Gaming in the state of New York, we will miss the most important part of running for mayor. I think it's a combination of over 42 years of a public life. And my life, I have gone through a lot, and the next mayor must be a mayor that has gone through a lot, that can help people who are going through a lot. It's more than competency, as I continue to say, it's character. It's knowing what it is to be a low skilled employee. I was a dishwasher as a child. Is knowing what it is to be on the verge of homelessness, as I just indicated. And like many of you, knowing it is to struggle through school and fight for CUNY. I went to school at night, 2 classes at a time until my son was born, down to 1. And then going to Albany and learning how to write laws that will impact on all of the entire New York State, and coming and becoming a borough president of the largest borough in the city of New York, and putting in place real programs. My reversal of my diabetes and blindness through a lifestyle change. Now there is a program at Bellevue Hospital, the first of its kind in America. We are reversing chronic diseases. My initiative to get the city to move away from serving processed meat to our children is something that's going to be duplicated throughout this entire country. That processed meat was a type 1 carcinogen. My affordable housing plan in partnership with local communities development is just something that is being duplicated throughout the entire city. And most importantly, my experience of turning around a dysfunctional agency to show how we can use a real-time governance model to make our city safe and ensure that all New Yorkers will live in a safe environment. It's the accumulation of my professional experiences and my life experiences that is going to bring the character that is needed to understand that the city can no longer function deep into the 21st century as dysfunctional as we are now. We're leaving far too many New Yorkers behind, not because taxpayers are not doing their job, but because government is not doing its job with tax dollars.
Thank you. Our next question is from Konstantine.
Yes, you've touched on this quite a bit, also in addressing Rana's question and Justine's question, and honestly throughout your campaign. So you've emphasized the need for far greater operational efficiencies across city agencies. And I'm curious, how do you achieve that at scale and during a fiscal crisis? I'm just curious, where do you start?
I love that. That's a great question. They say in campaigning that you campaign in poetry and you govern in policy. I have been doing just the opposite. I have been campaigning in policy because I need New Yorkers to know that our city is dysfunctional. And that's the foundation of my run for mayor. In the last 2.5 years, I have communicated with over 270 professionals in different industry areas. Just about every first deputy mayor that has ever served, I've met with and communicated with former commissioners, current commissioners, people who are in healthcare, education, all lines of operating cities I've sat down and communicated with. If you go on to my website, 100 Plus Steps Forward for New York City, you will see the result of those communications. But here's what we must do in the first 60 days in office. We must tell every commissioner you have to clearly define your mission. Second, you must have that mission tie into the overall mission of the city. And thirdly, which is extremely important, we must make sure no agency carries out an action that is in conflict with the mission of another agency. It sounds simple, but every day we are in conflict with each other. Just look at the Department of Education. How do you have the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene spends millions of dollars of taxpayers' money every year fighting childhood obesity, diabetes, and asthma, yet the Department of Education is feeding our children 960,000 meals a day. And what are those meals causing? Childhood obesity, diabetes, and asthma. How do you tell a mother that in order for you to receive support for your child who's dyslexic, you must sue the city first and hopefully get reimbursed to give the services to your child when you have 30% of the inmates at Rikers Island are dyslexic? Instead of giving the service to the mother so we can be more proactive and not reactive, so that child won't hit the streets, start selling drugs, and end up on Rikers Island because they believe they can't learn. So when you start to do a deep dive and understanding of the city, everything from the Department of Buildings, inability to allow restaurants to open in time, it's in conflict with small business services, to the health and hospital feeding patients food that really aggravates their chronic diseases, using our emergency rooms as primary cares facilities. If you look through every agency's, the way I have analyzed over the last 24 years, you will start to identify how the crises we are experiencing are self-created. Archbishop Desmond Tutu states, we spend a lifetime pulling people out of the river. No one goes upstream and prevent them from falling in the first place. It's cheaper to stop people from falling in. We become a city where we have professionalized pulling people out of the river. And I'm going to coordinate our city agencies to be more effective. And that is an investment for the future.
Thank you. Great answer. So our next question is coming from Justine.
Thank you. You have an extensive history with the city of New York, working as an NYPD detective, state senator, and most recently as Brooklyn Borough president, all positions where your decisions and leadership directly affected the people you were accountable for. In a time where New York is facing unprecedented challenges, both socially and economically, and coming off a city administration that has had a fraught relationship with many, if not most, of its constituencies, what is your formula for uniting New Yorkers and putting us back on track?
I love that. And I retired as a captain. You know, detectives get all the credit, you know that. But one New York. And I hear the energy out there, and I believe it's a fallout from the previous presidential election. We no longer talk to each other. We're watching the increase in hate crimes, anti-Asian violence, anti-Semitism, anti-LGBTQ community, and we're pointing to these actions. But in reality, we don't know each other as New York. We don't interact with each other. We are not engaging with each other. And, you know, I don't want to romanticize and sound nostalgic, but we know more about our Twitter accounts than we know about our neighbors. And I started a program 2 years ago called Breaking Bread, Building Bonds, off the heels of an increase in anti-Semitism. We are having 100 dinners all across the city, 10 individuals at each dinner, and each person is coming from a different cultural, ethnic background. And they're doing something revolutionary. They're talking to each other. They're talking about why they wear hijab, a kufi, a yarmulke, why they have services on Friday, or what is a sukkah, what is Ramadan, and just taking away the fear that we have about our diversity. And I believe in the energy of One New York. And then we need to be intentional in our schools. We need to have an asset-based educational system instead of a deficit-based educational system, and build in those diversities to be part of our learning environment. We have to develop the full personhood of our children so they can become adults that have a greater level of tolerance, acceptability, and inviting to the diversity of this city. And then we need to stop demonizing our affluent New Yorkers. 65,000 people in this city pay 51% of our income tax. They are only 2% of our income tax filers. We need all New Yorkers to be here. We need the individual who drives the limousine and the person who rides in the back of the limousine. And that is how we're going to get through COVID-19. But we have to do it intentionally by communicating with each other, tear down those walls that have historically prevented us from engaging in the beauty of our diversity and enjoying each other. I'm so happy to be the borough president of a place where 47% of the people speak a language other than English at home. It has allowed me to develop my full personhood and learn so much about people. It's a Shakespearean tragedy that people are isolated in their own cultural and their own ethnic enclaves instead of enjoying the fullness of the city. And that's what I'm going to do.
Thank you. Now we're going to move to our last student question coming from Rana.
Thank you. So speaking of all the divisions that you've been describing, I would like to get your take on the digital divide that has been exposed profoundly over the pandemic, particularly in Brooklyn. As our city's next leader, what is your solution and how will you empower those least advantaged to advance their civil rights and their economic status through better access and use of technology?
So important. First, many of us, we were aware of the digital divide problem for many years. I put over $125 million into our school system to address this divide because I knew if we don't prepare our children for the future, we're going to have a major employment issue. Pre-COVID, we had approximately 250,000 jobs that were available, but we could not fill it. So we were not dealing with an employment problem. We were dealing with a skills problem. And so as mayor, there's several things I believe we need to do. Number one, I voted against the Verizon franchise agreement renewal. We need to turn our Wi-Fi services into a utility company, just as gas and light are they're part of the utility companies. We need to do the same with our Wi-Fi's. We need to expand telemedicine and ensure that all families are able to utilize telemedicine. This is something that I leaned into as the borough president. I was able to get Brooklyn Hospital to do an amazing initiative during COVID, and Health and Hospital increased their capacity for telemedicine. And then we need to ensure that every child at a minimum should have a workbook, not just an iPad. You and I know how difficult it is to type papers and assignments on an iPad, but they should have workbooks. And do a GIS real-time mapping system with transparency to show where are we building out high-speed broadband so we can gauge it in real time. We operate in the dark too often in the city. And make sure every school at a minimum has high-speed broadband. We need to get on a fast track to have 5G to ensure that every community is receiving it at the same pace. So the goal is to really build out the high-speed broadband capabilities in the city. And we have not done a good job because I believe for the most part, we are not gauging it in real time. My mother used to always say, if you don't inspect what you expect, it's all suspect.
Great. Thank you, Borough President. And I have, one final question, for you to give advice to our student leaders here today on the panel, as well as to all the students who are watching virtually. For students who are interested in, getting into government and one day become leaders, what advice do you have to them as they're pursuing their careers, and what things could they be doing now to getting engaged? I know as Brooklyn Borough President, you're very interested in getting younger people involved on community boards and things of that nature. So what advice do you have for our students here today?
Get involved. Start out in any capacity. It may be as an intern, it may be as a volunteer, community board, but you just really have to get involved and then be open to have healthy debate and figure things out. We've reached a point where I just listen long enough to tell you how much I disagree with you, instead of saying, let me first seek to understand so I could be understood. There are different opinions and different variations to solving the problem, and be open to that. And we no longer engage in healthy conversations. We have basically sat in our separate corners. The bell rings, we come out fighting instead of coming out saying, I want to learn from you and you can learn from me. And the diversity is the key for me on making sure that we engage in real diverse conversation. I'm so proud when people do an analysis of my support base, political stated. Eric Adams has the broadest base coalition than any candidate that is running. It is clear that I have one of the largest number of African-American, Koreans, South Asians, Russian-speaking, Sephardic community, Chinese, Korean. I am the United Nations candidate, and I feel comfortable no matter what setting I am in. And I tell those who are going into government or politics, go into those communities where you're going to receive some healthy discomfort. If you are comfortable every day, then you are not growing and you have not grown. Feel the beauty of discomfort as you start to grow into the person who you want to become. And so I say, get involved, reach out, be a part of the change you want to see.
Well, thank you, Borough President, for engaging in this discussion today. Your accomplishments and visions are very impressive, and you've given us a lot to think about. Thank you for your service to our city and in being here today. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. Take care.
Great. So with that, and thank you to, again, to our audience for joining us for the first part of today's discussion. We're about to start part two. We have a large audience, and want a reminder that our next session is going to be on April 28th, which will start around 1 p.m. We will update anyone who's RSVP'd as we get closer to that event with our next slate of candidates. So with that, we're going to move on, and we're going to welcome now Kathryn Garcia.
I think you have to start my video. Okay.
We will do that.
There you go.
There we go. Okay, excellent. Thank you. So Kathryn is a lifelong New Yorker and a dedicated public servant and raised by public servants. Today, she lives 2 blocks from where she grew up in Brooklyn. So we have two Brooklynites in the house today. She has served as leader in city government across 2 mayoral administrations. Most recently, she was the commissioner for the New York City Department of Sanitation, the second woman to hold that role. And before that, she served as interim chair and CEO of the New York City Housing Authority. She also has served as the food czar during the city's COVID-19 response. And she previously held leadership roles at the City Department of Environmental Protection under the Bloomberg administration, where she was part of the response to Superstorm Sandy. She has promoted job creation, economic recovery, and environmental sustainability. Welcome, Kathryn, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Great. So Kathryn, as you know, this is part 2 of today's Law and Leadership program, and our student leaders today will be focused on the topic of leadership and their questions. As I mentioned in the first half of the discussion, we have 5 students. All of them are first-year law students. And as it turns out, because we randomly sorted them into groups by their schedule, we have more than 1 public servant in this group. So we're very excited to hear your thoughts as a longtime public servant. And as a quick time note, we've allotted 5 minutes for each student to ask their question and for you to give your response. And most likely each student will get to ask 2 questions today. So with that, we're going to quickly go right to our first question. And Konstantine, you're up.
Hi, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. My name is Konstantine. I'm a 1L evening student, and I'm interested in real estate law. I'm from Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and I have a passion for New York City politics and policy. And that passion really grew while I was a New York City Urban Fellow working in city government. So with that bit of background about me, my question to you is this. You've been endorsed overwhelmingly by the Department of Sanitation's unions, and this suggests an ability to foster a productive relationship while you served as sanitation commissioner. So I'm curious, what's in your secret sauce?
Yes, I have been endorsed by all of the folks who I managed at the Department of Sanitation. And it is really about coming to the table with respect and with a willingness to listen and to understand that they actually have a lot of knowledge about what's happening on the front lines as well, and that we can work together collectively for the greater good. And at the beginning of COVID, when we didn't really know that much, if you recall, we weren't told to wear masks. Even now I double mask up every time I leave my house, and we didn't know if it was spread easily on surfaces. So we really got together with our unions to talk about how we could keep them safe, and did some interesting things during the pandemic about ensuring that people from one garage didn't go to another garage and spread the virus. And that working together and being willingness to sit at the table and hash it out meant that we had a very successful relationship. But, you know, you got to be tough but fair. That is my approach when I walk into the room with my partners in labor.
Great, thank you. Our next question will be from Kayla.
Hi, Ms. Garcia, thank you for being here. My name is Kayla. I work for the City of New York during the day, and I'm a 1L Evening Division student looking to pursue criminal law. So my question to you is, what are the specific changes you anticipate having to make to your management style as mayor as compared to running a singular city agency?
Well, first, I wasn't only running one at a time. In the introduction, I was actually running most of them all at the same time. So my approach to management is that you need to create great teams and give them really clear mandates about what you want and what that vision needs to be, and hold them accountable, and be able to move from topic to topic really crisply, which is what I have done in my career. Whether or not it's like, oh, I'm going to do an 8 o'clock meeting on where we are operationally with sanitation, and a 9 o'clock meeting on where we are on ensuring that people did not go hungry during COVID. You got to be ready to take all of those issues all at once, but you need support, and bringing in talent has been one of the things that I have been very effective at doing.
Thank you. Our next question is coming from Katherine.
Good afternoon, Ms. Garcia. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. My name is Kathryn, and I was born and raised in Brooklyn, and I'm a 1L pursuing public interest law. And my question is, you have referred to yourself as New York City's go-to problem solver as you took on various roles to provide basic necessities to New Yorkers. As mayor, how will you translate the aspirations of nice words into meaningful actions with positive outcomes?
So I am the only candidate in this race who actually has a record of delivering in times of crisis, whether or not that was during Superstorm Sandy, where literally 42 pump stations went underwater. We had to get them all back up and running. We did that within 3 days. And that is looking at your team and looking at where the talent is and being really agile. And as I said, during COVID, putting together a team to deliver what at the height of it was like 1.5 million meals a day, using taxi drivers, National Guard, Parks Department, DOT, creating that literally virtually and overnight to ensure that we did not allow any New Yorkers to go hungry. Like, failure was not an option. And that is what I bring to City Hall.
Thank you. Our next question is coming from Rana.
Hello, Ms. Garcia. Thank you for being here. My name is Rana. I'm a Manhattan resident, also an immigrant and a tech entrepreneur. 1L studying with the goal of working on regulations of emerging technologies as it applies to the business and financial sectors. My question to you is regarding a remark that you recently made about the key to unity is leadership. You specifically said that leadership matters, but the diversity of the city, both racially and ethnically, also politically, is increasingly getting complicated. How does your leadership model account for the broad range of constituencies, and how do you bring people together towards common goals?
The diversity of New York City is really the beauty of New York City. It's what makes us so incredibly special, but everyone's voice has to be at the table. You lead by having communities trust that you are hearing them and going to deal with the challenges that they are facing. And they can be very different. But I have brought people into the room and, sat and hammered out legislation with the help of many city attorneys, I might add, that included the real estate board, the environmental justice advocate community, the New York attorneys for the public interest, in a way that came together to craft actual real positive legislation. That is what I do. But one of the fundamental pieces is that you need to start with a set of data so that you have one common understanding of what the problem is before you go and try and solve it.
Thank you. So with that, we're going to go to round 2 of questions. And this round, we're going to start with Kathryn.
Thank you. So integrity, transparency, and accountability are often referred to as 3 pillars of good government. What do they mean to you?
Oh, you have to approach your job as being a senior leader in New York City government with the utmost integrity, because the public needs to trust that you are doing the job for them. And put out, how's it going? At the Department of Sanitation, you can see where every plow truck has gone when it's snowing. You're able to track how the job is being achieved. I have absolutely no problems with making sure that New York City gets to judge me day in and day out. I think it's important that anyone who goes into public service knows that we work for you, that you pay our salaries, and the expectation of New Yorkers is that they need to know that you are working hard for them, that you are rolling up your sleeves and you are digging in and getting the job done. And so I have always operated with integrity and with making sure that we were being transparent.
Great. Now we're going to move to Justine.
Good afternoon, Ms. Garcia. Thank you for meeting with us. My name is Justine. I currently live in Manhattan and I work full-time as a New York City public servant. I am a first-year student in the evening division at New York Law School and am interested in pursuing a career in criminal justice. My question to you is this. You have served under two very different mayoral administrations, most notably serving as Commissioner of the Sanitation Department and interim chair of the New York City Housing Authority, positions where your actions directly impacted the basic needs of New Yorkers. In a time where New York is facing unprecedented challenges, both socially and economically, and coming off a city administration that has had a fraught relationship with many, if not most of its constituencies, what is your formula for uniting New York and putting us back on track?
Yeah, I think the first part of that is I certainly have served under two very different mayors, and I take different pieces of that from all of those experiences. But as I said before, you really need to actually look at what the information is and the data and be having conversations across the city all the time. Whether or not that is through the media or through directly with town halls, so that you are hearing from different communities what they're confronting. But you need to also be incredibly transparent as we move forward and make choices about where you are and where you're going. And this has been a challenging time on getting things, I would say, the execution done, including things like vaccinations. You could not have designed a program that would have put up more barriers for the most vulnerable New Yorkers than the one that was created, which is somewhat shocking. Understanding how government works means that it can work for everyone, but you also have to sometimes be more of a listener than a talker.
Excellent. Thank you. Our next question is coming from Konstantine.
Thanks. So you've had a long career in public service, and at a time when young people are very disillusioned with government, what's the key to inspiring them to join the ranks of city service, and how could they be a force for good?
Oh, so I have always found government and government service to be the most exciting place to work, particularly when you are a young person. You are actually going to probably be in the room or helping craft and untangle the most challenging policy work. This is not a place where we expect you to just be putting things in a file. We need real hard work from all of the folks who are working in the city, including young people. But it is also where you get the opportunity to touch the most people. When I was at DEP, we banned number 6 fuel oil, very heavy, dirty bunker fuel oil. It made a huge difference in our air quality, measurably different in the city of New York, which I know means there are fewer kids with asthma. This is the type of work you get to do when you work for government.
Thank you. Our next question is from Rana.
Well, along the same lines of Konstantine's question, it's regarding having a role model, which is key to inspiring others to engage and further to succeed and persevere. Can you speak to the significance of becoming the first female mayor of New York City and the importance of having an inclusive, representative leadership, especially for younger women who are looking at their leaders?
Yes, no, having women in leadership positions, we have been banging up against some glass ceilings, at least in New York City, for the last 400 years. And we bring our lived experience, whether or not that is, as mothers, as grandmothers, as single women in the city, and as working women in the city in many cases, and what that experience means. And that reflects policy decisions moving forward. You are going to look through the lens of should we or should we not be opening schools, from the lens of, I had kids. You're going to think about safety as I'm a single woman walking on the street. Do I feel safe? That is what you bring to the table. And that's why it's so important to have an administration that is reflective of all of our communities. And that they are listened to, not only reflective, but really at the table and listened to. And that people feel that that nobody has imposter syndrome. Like, you do belong in the room. If you're in the room, you belong in the room.
That's great. So we're going to go back to Kayla.
Thank you. How will you need to adapt your management style and relationship building style as you move from a frontline operational manager to a political leader?
So I actually don't think it changes that much. It means that I need to be doing much of the work that you might not think that I was doing on the political side, but I had to engage with many of our elected officials across the spectrum on any given day, and deal with a lot of stakeholders on any given day. So I just bring the ability to do that. And, what do they say? If you have a hard job, give it to a busy woman. Because being able to multitask and get that done is something that many of us practice every day.
Great answer. So we're going to go back to Justine.
Thank you. What strategies and lessons have you learned at the Department of Environmental Protection, Sanitation, the New York City Housing Authority that will allow you to reform the NYPD at this important inflection point?
The most compelling piece of my experience is that sanitation is a uniformed agency. And having clear and consistent discipline is something I've already done. And that is imperative in order to bring trust back to communities and to create an integration between not only the police department dealing with communities, but what does the rest of it look like? What does the social service package look like? What is the root problem that we are trying to solve? So it's not a criminal justice issue. But I also believe that New York City PD needs to actually recruit kids who are older. 21 is awfully young, and I believe they should be 25, and that they should live within the city limits. But understanding how to manage a uniform agency is something that I am uniquely qualified for. If you take a bribe and put a bag of garbage from the private sector into a public truck, you will get fired. It's very clear and consistent.
That's great. So that's the end of our question for our students, but I want to ask a closing question. What advice do you have? We have our student leaders here on the panel. We have many other students watching virtually at home who are interested in going into public service, interested in government after their law school career. What advice do you have for them who for those who are looking to potentially get engaged now, or how to shape their future career to end up where you are, and the diverse experiences you've had, if they're looking to pursue government and politics?
And so I would say embrace all of the opportunities, even if you think they're not the one that you necessarily foresaw, because there's so many incredibly diverse jobs within government, and there's diverse law within government. And I would encourage you to pursue public service. You would be the ones crafting new legislation. You will be the ones crafting new regulations. You'll be the ones going to court on how something impacts New Yorkers and being that advocate. It is something that makes it so you want to get up in the morning to go do the job and try and find the smartest person you can to work for.
That's great. Maybe that's you, right? So we'll send resumes.
Sounds good.
So Kathryn, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts here today. We all admire your leadership capabilities and commitment to the city, and we appreciate you taking time to speak here at our Law and Leadership Series, our inaugural event with our students, and to our viewing audience who are watching at home, many of our students, but also engaged members of the citywide community. We want to thank the audience for tuning in. And we want you all to please join us in 2 weeks for our next session in the Law and Leadership Series on April 28th. We'll send a slightly updated schedule as that's still a bit of information as far as the times. But please RSVP if you haven't done so already. There'll be a different Zoom link for that event. And we hope to see you all virtually and hopefully soon in person at events here, at New York Law School. Kathryn, I know you graced our city law, podium in the past. So, we look forward to inviting you back in the future and to be able to meet, in person with our students and our guests and our audience is all in the same place once it's safe to do so. So finally, again, on behalf of Dean Anthony Crowell, who we miss here today, and New York Law School, the Center for City Law, the Law and Leadership Institute, I want to thank our students who did a fantastic job researching the issues and asking your thoughtful questions. We are so proud of the leaders that you are becoming. Thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Really appreciate you having me here.